Thank you for discussion in the last panel. I saw Coco checking out the new mapper. How many folks actually have done mapping themselves? Just show of hands. All right, well, that number is definitely going to go up significantly when we start to get into things around mobile and 5G. So pretty excited about what's coming up there, more ways to get involved and participate in the network. There's some messaging about kind of, again, the idea of reducing barriers. And I know the last panel talked about that in terms of front end and a product perspective. But I think that's also an important thing to discuss with respect to talent and bringing more folks into the industry around crypto, around Web3 and wireless. So our next panel is going to discuss that a little bit more from a different perspective on how are we actually opening up the funnels, how are we reducing the barriers to bringing more talent into the ecosystem, different diverse backgrounds, different perspectives. It's good for all the things that we're building together as a community. So if we can welcome up the next panel, Vanessa, Parker, Brian, and Anita from Techcrunch, if you can join me on stage. Thank you, everybody. And again, let's just try to keep the discussion down there a little bit softer spoken, please.
Oh, I think I'm supposed to sit on that side. That's fine. All right, I think we're ready to get started here, yeah? Yeah.
I think we are.
Awesome. It's good to see everyone. I'm Anita Ramaswamy. I'm a senior crypto and fintech reporter at Techcrunch, and I will let all of these lovely people introduce themselves. Maybe if Vanessa, you want to start?
Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa. I'm a managing partner at Aglaé Ventures. We're an early stage Web3 fund. We invest in pre-seed, seed, and Series A. I've been in a space since 2013, early in Bitcoin, and then I was one of the first employees at Consensus and worked for another investment fund prior to that.
Hi everyone, it's great to be here. My name is Parker Jay-Pachirat. I'm on the investment team at FinTech Collective's DeFi Fund. We're an early stage crypto native fund based in New York. I'm also on the founding team of Boys Club, which is a social club, community, and DAO designed for women in Web3.
Excellent, thank you very much. My name is Brian Schuster. I'm the founder of Devmint School, where we take senior Web2 developers, train them in the Solidity Web3 stack, and then place them with organizations. Our real goal is to help fill the talent needs that we have in this space. We have so many great opportunities here and not enough people to fill them. And part of our mission is to help fill that gap with great, enthusiastic talent.
I think since we're here today to talk about bringing people into the Web3 space, it'd be cool to hear each of you just briefly share how you got into Web3.
Sure. So I went to a tech meetup in New York. There was a lot of like enterprise tech and Web2 tech. And then there was the founder of the Bitcoin exchange who was presenting. And he said, well, come and see us at the Bitcoin exchange downtown. So I went and my mind got blown away. I don't think I saw the opportunity at the time with Bitcoin as much as I did with Ethereum. And how I got into Consensus was that I was fundraising for my company, and my co-founder wanted to fundraise with Joe Lubin, and he says, we should meet with him and maybe he'll fund our company. And it turns out we hit it off and we totally understood what he was trying to do, and we joined the company.
Great. Parker?
Yeah, I feel like I had a little bit of an untraditional path into this space. I've always been very interested in systems of power and was actually studying something in school called critical theory. And the general sentiment sort of within my major and liberal arts school was actually pretty anti-tech. But I just went down this internet rabbit hole reading about AI, brain-machine interfaces, a lot of like deep tech and bleeding edge tech, and started making a lot of connections between what I was studying in school and the potential that I saw for these technologies to reshape the world, but for better or worse. And when I found out about blockchain, I'd actually known about crypto for a while. And at first I sort of was like, okay, token prices, not really for me. But I started looking deeper into blockchain and actually really had this light bulb moment of, wow, blockchain is just like all of these other technological innovations that came before it, like the World Wide Web, computing, the internet, and it has the potential to fundamentally reshape not only our financial infrastructure, but our supply chains, our manufacturing, our data, our identity, our privacy. And so that's what really drew me into this space.
Thank you.
I guess I'll keep it brief. So what ended up happening was I was interested in investing at some point. I think it was about 2016 or so. And I really wasn't interested in stocks. I wasn't interested in doing any sort of real investing. But I thought, oh, there's these things that look like cryptocurrency, called cryptocurrency. I guess I'll start looking at that and try that. And I wasn't interested in the tech at all. Then probably the next 6 months or so, I started seeing these crazy price variations. I started seeing a lot of stuff, and I started thinking, what is actually going on here? This is not like anything I've seen before. This is not like anything I've actually worked with. And so I probably spent about a year actually studying the technology, and it took me about that full year to really get it, to understand why they were doing the things the way they were, why the technology was done in such a way, why did you need decentralization, et cetera. And I pretty much became a fan from that point. I started writing about it, teaching people about it, and really became a big cheerleader for the industry. That was my path forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. So one thing I want to talk about is inclusivity in Web3 specifically. It means different things to different people, and different organizations have different ways of going about it, right? You have like maybe quotas or manifestos, principles, different ways that people think about bringing a diverse set of people into the space. So within all of your different work and your jobs, how do you think through inclusivity and bringing in an actually diverse set of builders?
Yeah. I think within Boys Club specifically, one thing that we've really noticed is there's so many different touch points, right, for crypto. There's social organization and DAOs, there's art and NFTs, there's trading and token prices. And one thing that we really emphasize within Boys Club, right, is that there are all of these different touch points. And I think time and time again, like talking to people in our community, like what draws them in is actually something different than maybe they expected or anticipated. Actually, one of my best friends is an artist. So for a very long time, I was trying to get her into crypto, get her excited about it by talking about NFTs. And that never resonated with her. But once I started sending her stuff I was reading and like peer-reviewed research on DAOs and social mobilization within crypto, she was hooked and actually created her own DAO in London for artists. And so I think like that really goes to speak to, there's so many different access points, and it's really important to be very like exploratory. And when you present this sort of idea of like crypto and Web3 to people, and show them that it's so much more than just what they might read about or what their initial mental model of it might be.
Yeah, what we've seen is the numbers in tech and crypto have not really changed at the developer level.
Yeah.
So I think the number of women, and I'm talking about the women's side, but it's also the same on the minority side. Number of women graduating from computer science, 30%. It doesn't change. So there's a lack of, it's just a pure numbers game where there's less women developers in the space, which means less women leading projects in the space, less women being a role model for other women. And, so it's kind of like a vicious circle. I don't want to seem negative, and there's a lot of things you can do. And like Boys Club is like an amazing organization. There's tons of organizations that are trying to focus on the developer side, and I think that's where we can make a lot of impact, whether it's sponsoring people at school, whether it's bringing people to hackathons, and just opening up the possibility that you can be part of it, and that there is no barriers to entry, like in the consumer part, where it's much more open, where you can be part of a DAO, where you can buy NFTs, et cetera. I feel like on the technical side, there might still be some impediments there.
So I think the approach that I've seen here, particularly when you do something new like this, is really getting a good sense of what exactly is your mission for this new thing you want to build, whatever this space is. For us, it's really to go out there and get as many talented people as we can from the world and bring them into the space. And I think a lot of people do that part of it. But then the next phase of it really comes from, well, where are you going to find those folks? Where are you going to find them? And I think a lot of people can get their head wrapped around a mission, but can't get their head wrapped around, well, you may need to look in unconventional places for you to be able to go and do that, to go and find those folks. Everybody wants to go to like the nice clean career fair where you're going to go and you're going to get a type of individual. It's a whole nother thing to basically go and look at like some random Discord channel that's out there, and now you're talking to people you never would have talked to before. I mean, like one of the groups that I've spoken with is actually a server that's just people who are just fascinated with technology. Like they're literally like, some of them are like, you know, flipping burgers in your day job, and yet are now building like these networks on their own to basically go and do that. I think that the way that you fulfill your mission is by almost throwing out your preconceptions on where you're going to find folks, what they're supposed to look like, how they're supposed to act, and really stay focused on who are the people that we're really trying to impact here? What is that mission that we have here? And where can we go and find those folks and really do it without any preconception about where they're coming from? And I find that you get a really diverse group of folks coming in when you make that happen. And you really put that in place.
Just to kind of add on to that and piggyback off of that, like Wall Boys Club is focused on inclusivity, and while we are sort of designed for women and have that sort of voice and brand, we don't see inclusivity as being a women's affinity group or a sorority. Like we see inclusivity as being inclusive to everyone. And a lot of people come to me and have this sort of misconception of like, oh, I'm a guy, I can't be in the Boys Club Discord. I'm like, no, you totally can. Like, come in. Like, and so we've been really intentional about that as well. And I think that's like really important in thinking about like what does inclusivity look like in Web3, and like what do we want that to look like 5 years from now? Is that just going to be groups of dudes and groups of girls like segregated? Like hopefully not. So like that's one thing that we've been really intentional about in our building too.
So Parker, you mentioned, you know, coming from this like liberal arts background and studying critical theory and some of the criticisms of tech that you've heard, and I've run into a lot of that as well. And so I'm just curious about how you all think through like bringing new people into the space when one of the biggest criticisms is sort of like the volatility of crypto, and perhaps when people are coming in from marginalized communities or like different backgrounds, that could be, I mean, this isn't my wording, but I've heard criticisms of it being sort of predatory in some ways. Like what advice would you maybe give to people who are looking to enter the space and are worried about those sorts of things?
I mean, I think like, first of all, acknowledging that scams happen and are real is really important. Like there are a lot of scams in crypto. There are also a lot of scams everywhere else in the world. So I think like, first of all, acknowledging that, and then also providing the resources to really dive in deeper, and just like really encouraging people to do their own research, showing them what to look out for, like being sort of like a helping hand, I'd say, like along the way, would be my response to that.
Yeah, and actually thinking about what I do, and I think of what I take my students through as an introduction, because they're really excited about the space, they want to go in there.
Yeah.
But I have a lesson that I literally call like the fear of God lesson that's right at the beginning of the course, which is really saying this is a really exciting place. But if you're going to be building protocols, if you're going to be going out into the world and handling people's money, you got to take that careful. You have no clue how dangerous this stuff actually is. You have no clue how that is there, you know, what's out there. There's this really exciting part of this that we want people to be a part of. It's what gets them latched on. But there's a certain point where you have to let them in on what the full picture really looks like here, and really show them this is the beast you're actually dealing with here, and being honest with them about what that actually looks like. There are scams, there are things that are out there, and you can only protect them so much before you go out there and say, I trust you and respect you enough that if I'm going to give you this information, you're going to use it out there, that you're going to look into this, and that if you're going to make a mistake, it's okay. I've gotten locked into scams, I've lost things in this way, but you're doing things to make sure that you're not going out with reckless regard. But I think at a certain point, once you give them the information, if you respect them enough, you basically say, this is up to you now, you're part of this community, welcome, be careful. At least that's the way I approach it.
Yeah. One thing I've been thinking about a lot is when, you know, all three of you are sort of, and this discussion is focused on bringing in new developers and new builders and creators into crypto, but there's also the user side, right, and diversifying that. So I'm just curious, like, do you think those two things are interconnected, and in what ways?
Actually, I'll start with this one. So I think we do have a lot of problems with the way that we onboard people today, particularly just from a user interface problem. And I really look at the wallet as being the main area where we have a lot of challenges built in. And when we talk about diversity, it's that you basically have to be a developer to use these wallets really effectively. You have to be a developer to really understand what's going on, how to use gas, how to deal with errors and things like that. And I think that in order to get to the next level, we really need, one, we need great user design people actually in the space thinking through how should people use wallets. And then two, actually building wallets for specific use cases. So we can say, okay, if you're in gaming, you have this sort of wallet. If you're investing, you have this sort of wallet. And I think until we really take that deeply and to say we are not doing a good enough job with user design, we have to innovate on this area, I don't think we're going to get very far. And I think to answer the other part of it, we really do need developers who are really focused on that specifically and saying, how do we make this easier for folks to get involved?
I'll piggyback on this and more from the entrepreneur's perspective and how we look at it when we invest in companies and when I was at Consensus. So the user-centric aspect and also the onboarding of new employees and your capacity to basically create excitement as a founder about what your mission is crucial in onboarding new talent, because it's going to speak to them. If someone is already in the space, they got it, they understand. But if you're able to really communicate that very clearly and feel so that people feel they're part of that journey, I think you'll be very successful, and then you'll create not only diverse companies, but also products that are more in tune with their audience.
Brian, I would actually push back a little bit against something you said. I totally agree, like user experience and user design is crucial, and we definitely need that to be better within this space. But I actually think like you don't have to be a developer, you don't have to be technical to learn about what gas is or how to use a wallet. And I actually think like in my personal experience, I've seen a lot of people that feel really intimidated about getting into crypto because they're not a developer, they don't have that technical expertise, and actually just encouraging them and saying, you know what, it's okay, like it's totally fine, and we need more like skills outside of that within crypto too. That kind of encouragement has helped them a lot, and I think like it's sort of like a sharing of knowledge, right? Showing that like you don't have to be a dev, hopping on a Zoom with someone, right, and helping them set up their wallet or explain that to them. But to go back to your sort of initial question, I do think like we are at a really, really interesting stage of this industry right now. It's still super early, and what that means is like anyone who's interested in it is inherently shaping what this is, whether that's the tools we're building, the culture we're building, the community we're building, our sort of reputation in this space. So I do think like users, there is like a tight sort of feedback loop between users and I guess like creators in the space, and I think like that speaks to the high level of emphasis, right, that all of these protocols and companies put on ownership, right? The ultimate goal of like a lot of these protocols and companies for their users is actually to convert those users into owners and to foster that ownership. And I think that's like the best way to develop your roadmap too, right? Like we all know that user input and user research is crucial, and when you actually have those users and you empower them with the ability and responsibility and freedom to start their own projects and sort of take that in their own way, that's like super powerful.
Thanks, Parker. So I want to end this on a note of positivity, because I feel like we're all here because we feel that there's things to be hopeful about in Web3. And so I guess, having discussed some of the hurdles, already kind of past that, what are some bright spots that you're seeing, like projects you're excited about that you feel are generating true utility and also helping onboard a diverse set of people into the space?
I see a lot of great organizations like Boys Club that are focused on bringing in more women developers. There's also things like Black Girls Code and things like that. So really great initiatives. I would hope that everyone in this room sees them as resources in their process, because it's a great way to surface talent. And I think if we work maybe a little bit more with universities earlier on and boot camps, etc., and if we make that a priority, I think it's really important to still be intentional. Whether it's in Web3 or any, I used to work in traditional finance, it's the same thing. You have to be intentional about what the results that you want to get, and then find a way and a process to get there. It might be a little bit more difficult, but the results yield great benefits.
Thank you for the kind words. It really means a lot. I'm super bullish on zero knowledge and zero knowledge proofs and zero knowledge rollups, specifically this darknet ecosystem. I think ZKOs are a super viable solution for scaling Ethereum, but they also are offering completely new paradigms of what we can do with privacy, security, new ways of exchanging value and coordinating. So yeah, if you're building in the ZK space, hit me up, ParkerJP on Twitter. I'm also super excited about novel and alternate governance mechanisms like consensus voting, and I'm really bullish on all of the design space that we still have to explore in that area as well.
Actually, I think I'm most encouraged by what I'm going to call the new industry that's kind of cropping up. Because I've been in this space since 2016, 2017, and all the hot startups and all these people that were building were really truly new blockchains, new protocols, new things that were really techy and deep in the space. This is the first time that I'm actually seeing what I would call consumer-facing startups coming out and actually using the technology, but really focused on end users. I mean, a couple of the companies I advise are really trying to think, how do we integrate Web3? How do we use these things? But then what do we do for the end user? And for me, this is presenting the biggest opportunity for folks to start building and actually doing stuff with companies they can recognize, or products they can recognize. Protocols, you often have to do a lot to get involved and be useful for those organizations, but here there's a lot of space for building good user interfaces, building analytics, building, back-end services, and that's what makes me incredibly encouraged about our future, that we now have these organizations that look more familiar for people to get on board, even though we're in the early stages of it.
Thank you so much, Brian, Parker, Vanessa. This was a great conversation.
Thank you.